Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go right. Everybody else went left, so I'm going to go right and mix it up here a little bit. So most of you probably needed Rosetta Stone today because you've been exposed to 3 different Southern accents today. Includes our Aussie, right? He was in here. So anyway, it's good to be here today. The topic that I'm going to be covering today is a little bit different because it's going to delve more into the human factor element and what our company is doing from a strategic basis to put more focus on process safety. We recognize, because I worked at a plant that formerly was the Houston Chemical Complex. We had 23 deaths in a significant explosion in 1989. I worked at that site, and I worked through that culture. So I've been there. We had some of the most elaborate SIS systems and alarm systems that you could imagine at that site. And we have benefited from those tools. So I'm not minimizing benefit from those tools, but I'm taking your mind in a little bit different direction today. So the title of my talk is Addressing Human Factors, and I'm going to dive right into that. So does anybody ever remember the character from City Slickers named Curly? You remember that guy, right? Yeah, he said he had one thing. He never told us what that one thing was, like a secret to life. I think I know what that one thing is for my job within my company. And it is to protect people. It is to drive down risk and protect people. It's just that simple, and it gets very personal very quick. And each of you are in here. We talk about reliability, we talk about cost, we talk about those things, but in the end, the number one benefit that we want out of that is we want a safe plant, right? We want it to run well, and we will protect those people on the ground. So I'm going to share this with you because I've really gotten a lot out of this book. It's from the Center of Chemical Process Safety. Anybody familiar with that? Seen it before? Fantastic book. It's a little expensive. It's about $100 on Amazon. But they put this book out. It's on conduct of operations, operational discipline, which we're going to go into just shortly. But it's an invaluable book. And I'm going to have to admit I hate to read. I got my PhD in organic chemistry. I was reading those thick textbooks, and when I got out, I said, I don't want to read anymore. All my family is teachers and are big book readers, but not me. But this was a fantastic read. I was stuffed full of Post-it notes and highlighted throughout. So within that book is this story. What I'm going to take you through here is kind of a case for change that I would present to even our operators and craftsmen in our facilities. And this is actually part of their training curriculum that we're going to go through. It's kind of a case for change. Refocus your mind. Okay, this gentleman on the right is named Atul Gawande. Some of you will be more familiar with him when I tell you a little bit more about him later, but he is a very prestigious surgeon that has a Stanford education. He works at Harvard. He's got he's a public speaker, etc. Several of you also I'll relate something he's a little bit more famous for in a second. In 1999, the Institute of Medicine did a survey, and they found that there was 100,000 fatalities in the U.S. per year from avoidable medical procedures. Imagine if that's one of your family members. Think about that for a second. Be pretty catastrophic, right? So in 2007 and 2008, the World Health Organization put together a study. They formed a cross-functional team, and one of the members of that team was Dr. Gawande. Okay? When they initially got going, they were looking at procedures and how can they change procedures and how can they put checklists and all that stuff. And he was like, "This is stupid. I hate this stuff." And he was really pushed back on it. "I don't like it." But he bought into it. He bought into the team culture. They developed these surgical checklists. All right? How many of us have gone to the doctor and had a surgery like on our leg or whatever, and the first person comes in and says, "What's your date of birth? Blah, blah, blah. What's your name? Blah, blah, blah." And they say, "Which is it? Left or right?" "Left, left, left." And then they leave, and then another person comes in and do they think I'm crazy? They're asking me the same questions, right? But what are they doing? Check, check, recheck. Check, check, recheck, right? They're cross-checking what? To drive down probability of risk and improve your chances for success. So what they observed is when they put this 19-point surgical checklist together, they had a 50% reduction in post-surgery death rate. That's pretty substantial, especially if that's your loved one, right? That's a lot of people. So when Dr. Gawande went back to his practice at the Harvard, the hospital that he was associated with, he said that on a weekly basis, using that checklist procedure, they would catch something. Somebody's loved one their life was probably being saved. Pretty significant. Maybe not the cell phone being buried in the guy's stomach like on TV. You remember that one? That's kind of a funny one. So anyway, out on his website now, he actually has his vita or his background, et cetera, featured in kind of a checklist fashion. He supports the value of the checklist. He's also wrote the checklist manifesto. Some of you may have heard of that before, but he's now an author. So another famous scene I like to bring up. Everybody recognize this movie up here? Okay, that's Rain Man. I'm a native Oklahoman, and so they happen to be in the Oklahoma City airport, and I kind of hate it that Aiden left because he's in this scene. He's trying to get Rain Man to fly, and Rain Man said, I'm not getting on the plane. They all crash. He says, surely there's an airline out there that doesn't crash. And he said, Kwanzaa. Well, Kwanzaa does not fly to Oklahoma City last time I checked. But anyway, from 1947 to 2009, the fatality rate in this industry dropped from 50 down to 0.05 fatalities per billion passenger miles. Audience, please tell me, what is the significance about the dates that are up there? Anybody? Think about it.
First Kwanzaa fatality of 2000.
No? Okay, for the sake... There you go. We got a pilot over here, right? So we come out of World War II, and what happens? All those pilots that have been training for battle and making sure their people on their planes were safe and reliable and getting from point A to point B, and they were flying check, and recheck, right? They brought that into that industry. That's real data. That means a lot. You can convince people when you show them data of what checklist and proper procedures put in place can mean to their life. So this is just the textbook definition that comes straight out of that book that I gave you on conduct of operations. I like to sum this definition up. Basically, it's your processes and procedures. To me, the responsibility of good COO falls purely on leadership. It really does. A lot of times we put that on the operator or craftsman, but it has to be driven at the leadership level. When we look at operational discipline, this is the performance of all tasks correctly every single time. How do you bring that level of discipline into your operations? It's the commitment of everyone in the organization to rigorously follow established procedures. Now here's a quote from the Baker Report back in 2007. Lack of operating discipline, tolerance of serious deviations from safe operating practices. This was back during one of the BP incidents. I'm not picking on BP because we all can fall in. We can all find examples in our own house on this, of where we have gaps in use of procedures. And then also high-performing organizational capability. And they said, hey, it's not technical, it's cultural. And that's what we're finding. But in the end, if you want to drive if you reduce the amount of operational discipline that you have, if that continues to go down, your risks are going to go up. They're inversely proportional. So that's where we want to invest our time. This is a very busy slide. Don't intend it for that, but it's in the slide deck, and it provides you an example of one company's EHS strategy. This is our entire strategy for a company on environmental health and safety. And the reason that I wanted to focus on this is right up here in the vision, the very first line, eliminate high severity, high potential process safety events. That is our level of focus. And I'm going to explain that here shortly. So if you look at the history of over time of our company, this is our recordable injury rate data since 2002. Our company began in 2000. Goes all the way out to year to date, which I think that's even dropped a little more since then. But during that time, we've implemented tenets. It's kind of our guiding principles of our company. We implemented an operating hierarchy where we put people first over processes, over quality, over this and that, right? Operational excellence. We have a great operational excellence program. Stop work authority, life-saving rules. Some people call those cardinal rules. And we said, wow, our personal injury rate, it just continues to fall. And everybody's like, hey, that's great. But what we saw with the blue line, that is our Tier 1 and Tier 2 process safety event rate. It's basically calculated in a similar fashion to recordable injuries, but it's based on the number of Tier 1 and Tier 2 events that you have. That was kind of flat. Well, we invested all this time in proper PPE and slips, trips, and falls and making sure people were following these simplified procedures where they don't burn themselves or something like that. But in the end, if we have one process safety event, we can go back to that time that I was talking to you about and have another 89 explosion. It just takes one event. So we asked ourselves, are we really putting our focus where we should? So what we have here are the recordable injuries that have occurred in our company since 2013. So when you go over to the right, you look at things like overexertion and fall on the same level. And we fell victim to it, right? Somebody strained their back and they had a recordable injury, and then it's like it goes on maybe your company metrics, right? And you've got management banging down on top of you like, oh, that was stupid. Why did you're impacting our company performance, and you had this recordable injury, right? And I am not minimizing those injuries at all. My own father was an administrator at a university and came out of his office, slipped on ice, hit his head, and died. That was a fatality. That was a workplace fatality. So I'm living testimony to that. But is that really where the majority of our focus could be? We're actually good at that. We have to maintain that level of focus. But as you move over here, you get into caught and compressed or crushed, fall to a lower level, right? Fires and explosions, which fires and explosions, how are those going to be caused? It's getting outside the pipes. We had to focus on where it's getting outside the pipes, because when that happens, our potential to have a severe injury or incident is going up. I don't know if you guys have seen this chart before, and I know that SIF means a lot of things different to this community, so it's a little bit different definition in the EHS community. Serious injury or fatality. Many of us have seen this triangle where they say, oh, well, the number of near misses relates to the number of recordables, which relates to the number of fatalities or injuries, right? That's not necessarily a direct correlation. And they've done a lot of recent studies, and what they've done is they've gone in, there is a portion of those near misses that are called high potential. Something really bad could have happened, right? It wasn't like a trip in the parking lot or I sprained my ankle on a rock or something like that. It was something serious. Something fell from way up in grade, or we had hydrocarbon get out and nobody was injured. It was a near miss like that, right? Those directly correlate. There's a direct correlation between those. So we said we have to put focus on those. So one of the things, I'm going to go back to this, one of the things that we do now, all of our high potential process safety events or high potential events, those are communicated broadly to the entire enterprise. We haven't normally done that historically on all near misses, but we do for high potentials. And there is a smaller subset of them, and we get a lot of learnings out of those. So from what is expected from our employees, it just boils down to simple fundamentals. We expect them to understand and follow established procedures, reduce their risk. This is a big one, getting people to speak up. That's a big topic. And we invest heavily on that with our employees and our contractors. And then I like what you're saying about we have to continuously educate and we have to continue to learn. So when we get back to the EHS strategy, not going to go into great details, but I've circled areas where conduct of operations and operational discipline play a big role in this overall strategy. Again, getting back some key attributes of COO and OD. On the COO part, you're developing good processes and procedures. You're providing that appropriate level of training for your employees. And that is a big responsibility of leadership. You can't be ambiguous. You have to have clear authority and accountability. I'm not going to go through all those, but it's a big responsibility of your leadership. As you get down into operational discipline, then you kind of transfer more of the responsibilities, kind of everybody's game then. And a lot of it's based on the knowledge of the operators and craftsmen that you have out in the field. They're closest to where those hazards will occur. So how do we invest and how do we move forward with our company? So one is when we look at key attributes of a highly reliable organization, one always has to have a chronic sense of vulnerability. That was talked about in the morning session a little bit. I really like, there's some videos out there on YouTube and probably other sessions. Shell has put out some videos on chronic unease. Has anybody ever seen those? Those are really cool, very well produced videos that kind of say you have to have a sense of vulnerability and you have to respond to weak signals that you're measuring in your organization and recognize them. But the other thing is you have to encourage a culture of risk discovery, reporting, and corrective actions. I worked at that union facility where we had the explosion, our culture was damaged, and they said we would never get VPP, ever. The South Area Director said, you never get VPP at that site, they hate each other. And we got VPP, and 2 days ago they set their all-time recordable injury rate record. Every culture can change. They just have to be convinced that it's going to benefit them, and they're going to go home safe to their families. So from a reporting standpoint, and I'm not going to bore you with great details, but we do have 14 key process safety metrics that we track within our company. They span from Tier 1, Tier 2 process safety events to, we've got a category called Tier 3, it's even a lower level, but mice, PMs, and there's a number of things that go into those categories that I'm not going to explain here, but we do track those. We also put a tremendous focus on the Tier 1 and Tier 2 process safety events. Are people familiar with those terms? So I'll put it in terms that's easier to understand. We'll just take flammable gases. There's different categories of chemicals, right? But let's just take the flammable gases. If you had a Tier 1 process safety event, you've let at least 1,000 pounds of hydrocarbon out to the atmosphere. Okay? People in our industry have those. They can be tens of thousands of pounds. 1 pound of flammable gas has about the TNT explosive equivalent of like 11 pounds of TNT, 1 pound. So you let 1,000 pounds out, you can imagine the type of boom that you can have. You move down to a Tier 2, you've let out at least 100 pounds. You see what I'm saying? Okay, go from 1,000, Tier 2 is 100, Tier 3 is a lower level, but you still let the hydrocarbon get outside the pipe. So we have 17 PSM sites, and we put tremendous focus on this. So when you look at the consequences of a Tier 1 and Tier 2 process safety event, man, there's a lot of bad things that can be associated with that. This is actually a real incident. I'm not going to name the company. This happened in Texas at a refinery. And can you imagine that you're standing at your house and your loved ones are working over there and you see a mushroom cloud like that? This would be an example of a pretty heavy Tier 1 process safety event. But that can easily happen if you have that kind of hydrocarbon get out and it finds an ignition source. So you're dealing with injuries, fire, explosion, business interruption, community impact. You're always going to have a high-level incident investigation and negative attention to effective facility. I lived that at that site that I worked at, but we were able to overcome it. And then just a significant adverse impact on morale. So I'm going to share with you right here. So we took all of our Tier 1 and Tier 2 process safety events from 2011 through 2017. I won't talk about the specific number, or somebody from my legal will come in here and pull me with a rope or something. So we took all those events and we broke them down statistically, and when we did that, they broke out consistently into 3 categories. Our number 1 cause of process safety events was first line break. That's where you're opening it up. Like you got a turnaround, outage, maintenance, you're opening up lines, right? You have the chance for hydrocarbon to get out. Second one was return to service. Kind of your whole thought of walk the line, right? Now you're putting equipment back in service. Have you caught all the bleeders? Some sites would just open the bleeders and then count that their operators could go find all the bleeders like an Easter egg hunt. Right? Other sites would put a tag on them. Other sites would put a tag and lock on them. Other sites would put a tag, lock, and build like an EID list, with listed out, and then go cross-check all of them off. Remember the check, check, and recheck? You're putting your life on the line. Okay? And then lastly was equipment assembly. I want to mention that real quickly. Okay, you have thousands of contractors and maintenance personnel in your own plant show up for a turnaround or outage. They're working on equipment. They're out there breaking stuff down. The number 1 cause of equipment assembly issues that caused a process safety event in our company was we installed the wrong part. So then, man, your mind goes off, how in the heck did we do that? How did we get there? Well, did we buy the right part? Did we identify it on the work order? Was it identified in SAP? When the guy went out in the field, was it written down correctly? Did somebody cross-check it? There's all numbers of things that you could do, right? And the number 1 part, anybody want to guess what the wrong part was? Oh, man, you guys, it's like Family Feud. Boom, number 1 answer every time. It's always a gasket, right? So I went out to one of our sites the other day, and we're kind of talking about operational discipline stuff, and I'd learned something from another site, and I said, guys, aren't you only using this one particular brand of gasket? Yep, we don't let any others come in here. Well, another site out there uses that same gasket. They have it color-coded. They give that to the operators for their packages, and they take it out in the field, and they go to that craftsman and say, hey, it's a maroon. It's supposed to be in this service. Is that the right gasket? Well, can you imagine if you have that conversation with that craftsman? Oh, crud, man, they're checking this stuff out. I need to install the right one. Are you using the right torquing procedures? You get it right, so that later you haven't created an opportunity to set an employee of yours up for lack of success and get hydrocarbon outside the pipe. Okay, so we've invested a lot in these procedures. So here's a story I like to tell to our operators and craftsmen in the field. This is kind of an analogy I brought up because my kids are really big into video games. Anybody play video games, or kids like video games, right? All right. So a lot of video games that you play, initially in the game, you're picking up coins, you're getting points, right? You're shooting little simple targets, and you're racking up points. And then what do you got to do to move to the next level? You got to fight a boss or a big plane, and you got to shoot it a bunch of times, and you may have 3 lives, you may have 1 life, but your best opportunity to die in the game, right? I always can hear a pin drop in the control room when I tell that story, and I say, those are your big bosses. Do those right. If you want to increase your chance to go home alive at the end of the day and tomorrow and the next day, do those things right in our company. 40% of our highest Tier 1 process safety events, 40% are line break. That gets people's attention. Okay, so this is something that was put out by DuPont Sustainable Solutions. I really like it. I'm not going to read through all these, but it's an excellent slide to use in a safety tailgate. You actually can use it multiple times. You can just pick one item and talk with operators and craftsmen and say, many people don't even know the procedures exist. We had a gentleman walk out on a live tank with hydrocarbon. They asked him to pull the thermocouple. He pulled the thermal well. And all this process came out. And when they asked him, he said, I did not know what I was doing. How do you get to that point? Okay. He didn't probably know the procedure existed. He may have been too embarrassed to say in front of his peers, to speak up, right, and acknowledge that we had an issue. So they also put a lot of emphasis in their experience. They say the best place to start is a quality of procedure. So we're doing just that. So looky here. These are required manufacturing standards. If we're behind other companies, then so be it. But if this is where we're at, we're putting out required manufacturing standards that everybody needs to comply to on what? Line break, return to service. Sound familiar? Right, our 2 biggest costs. We've got another one that's coming forward this year on equipment assembly. It's a little bit more complicated because there's a lot of processes associated about that. But this is one of my favorites, is leak response protocol. We copied this from our parent company, Chevron. And what they've done is, I call it the don't be a hero procedure. Had an operator on a compressor deck. Ethylene went out to the atmosphere. It was this cloud. It's bigger than this room, right? He had a shutdown device over there, and he had a shutdown device 2 blocks behind him in the control room. Which shutdown device did he use? He went to that one. This was about 8 or 10 years ago. I kind of blame myself because we had a pitiful environmental record, and I was putting a lot of emphasis on we don't want to have environmental events. And I think when he saw that hydrocarbon cloud, he was thinking it's an environmental event, right? And he should have been focused on personal safety. We're getting to that point. Leak response protocol basically just says when you get a leak, back away, go in the control room, get your ERT involved. And they're doing it. And we're seeing less people being presented with risk. So we want to change the trajectory in our company, and these are some of the things that we're doing. Changing manufacturing standards, a new procedure management system, critical procedures, operational cadence like turnover and shift meetings and those sorts of things, and you also see the operating window philosophy. That's in line with it. So here, I get credit for something related to the conference there. So I want to focus just a second on first level leader. We actually built this curriculum with our ops managers with all of our plants, and we take all of our frontline supervisors through 9 core modules. I want to focus on the 3 in the center. We take them through, we use a vendor called Balmert that teaches them these Balmert tools to use. It's just safety lingo that they use with their shifts. And then we take them through 2 safety leadership modules, which you kind of see the contents that's there. We recognize that if we're going to improve, the biggest investment we can make is on our first level leaders. They manage more people in the company than anybody else, and they're right at the first line. So that just gives you a little bit of flavor of what we've done in our company, what we've recognized as issues, and the things that we're putting in place to improve. In the end, that is our vision right there for our company. I developed this little COO-OD logo. Anybody recognize kind of what it is? We use the gear as our symbol for operating excellence, and the swoosh is in our symbol, so it's kind of like check the box, right? And we want people to be committed. So I really appreciate your time, appreciate you coming in here and hearing me out, and hopefully you can garner something that you can take back to your own facility. Thank you.
Questions for Stan? I tell you what, I am blessed with some great speakers on my track.
Yeah.
You sir.
When it comes to human factors, your critical limits and procedures, you mentioned
Yeah.
a lot around procedures and
Yeah.
What do you use paper-based procedures or visibility to operators, maybe inside, outside, to their critical limits? Is there
You talking about like our SOPs, right?
Well, or we call them SOCs, where we're at safety operating.
So I can sit here and represent something I want to represent truth, okay? And we blended cultures to form our company. We have all these different sites, and I like the herding cats or herding ducks. Maybe we're herding ducks a little bit, right? We're trying to get everybody aligned. We have some plants that make the mistake of putting their training materials right on top of their procedures. Operators got to go print out a heavy document, right? We're trying to get them concise. We're trying to get it into a common database that every site uses. That was on one of the bullet points up there. And then we want to co-blend. That's something we've been kind of talking to PAS about operating window and getting those operating limits in the procedures. I wish I could say that we're doing best practice, but we're not there yet.
Well, I'm interested in the same issue, so.
Yeah,
we can chat.
absolutely, absolutely. Yes, sir.
So, yeah, Stan, I thought it was really interesting. You showed several steps and how your process safety metrics were reducing over time.
Yeah,
And you showed bubbles showing different actions.
yeah.
Just trying to understand how do you, so you move into maybe 5 years out. You have all of these great things you have done before.
Yeah.
How do you maintain the focus on that with people's memory, people changing out? I mean, typically the flavor of the day is what's the thing we're focusing on now?
So for the sake of time, I'll pick one. We have what's called our tenets of operation. There are 10 of them. They're like fundamental rules that we say that we're going to abide and follow. We still train people up on those. We still advocate on those things. We have life-saving rules. Some of you have cardinal rules, always, never working under suspended load and maintaining proper safety in a car. We just have to maintain that level of training. But right now, we're really trying to hone our focus in on process safety. So much. I attended a tailgate the other day. Their cadence in the tailgate, they were presenting everything, just going over alarms and going over maintenance and all that. And they had a line break on there, and they kind of skipped and they kept going. And I said, whoa, hold on. And I did my little spiel in there in front of about 60 operators. And when I identified that line break, a young operator in the back, he raised his hand and he said, I'm doing 2 to 3 line breaks today that aren't on the agenda. Awesome. We're getting where we want to get, right? Got to keep training up on them, keep them fresh.